Welcome to this battle map presentation on the Battle of Gate Fulford, 20th of September 1066. The aim of this presentation is to know the events and consequences of the Battle of Gate Fulford. If you are unfamiliar with my battle map presentations, I basically take a map that I've badly drawn in Microsoft Paint and then I very crudely animate the events of the battle on top of it. However, I'm told that they're quite a clear and easy to understand way of learning the battles. So this first Battle of Gate Fulford is a showdown between Edwin and Morcar, the English earls, and the invading Harald Hardrada. Edwin and Morcar basically fighting on behalf of the English king Harold Godwinson, who is down in the south expecting an invasion by William of Normandy. So without further ado, let's have a look at the battle. So here is the battlefield at Gate Fulford. You can see Gate Fulford in the middle. That's the gate, the street going to York. It happened on the 20th of September of 1066. The Vikings versus the Saxons. Now a ford is where you cross a river or stream by getting your feet wet. There's no bridge there, you simply walk through a shallower part of the river. And so Fulford is the fuel ford. It's the ford where people would bring the fuel or the firewood up to the city of York. In the middle of Fulford was Germany Beck. This was a tidal stream. So at various times of the day, it was too wide to actually cross. So you needed to wait until the tide went out, the River Ouse took more of the water in, and finally the beck or stream would recede far enough that you could walk across it. And that's really how our battle begins. Let's consider the Saxon deployment first of all. On the right hand side we have got the Northumbrians led by Earl Morcar. We've heard his name before. He was the son of Earl Elfgar of Mercia. And then we have the Mercians, who are led by Edwin. Okay, so let's make a few notes now on the Saxon deployment. Earl Edwin and his Mercians secured the bank nearest the River Ouse. Morcar and the Northumbrians took up the centre and other flank. A small rise in the land made communication difficult. Basically, from certain positions, Morcar could not actually even see Edwin, much less give any messages to him. So that was something they would have to bear in mind. They numbered about 5,000 warriors, most of them thanes and local feared from Northumbria itself. Now let's consider the Viking deployment. Opposite Morcar we have got Tostig. That's Tostig Godwinson, the brother of King Harold, who had treacherously decided to invade to get his earldom back in league with Harald Hardrada, who had his elite bodyguard with him. They were on the other side of Germany Beck. They also brought with them a crucial reserve. However, this reserve was invisible to Morcar and Edwin, who could not see behind a rise in the ground. So the Viking deployment worked like this. Hardrada and his elite bodyguard took up positions opposite Edwin, nearest the River Ouse. Harold's brother Tostig took up the positions opposite Morcar. A large Viking reserve was kept hidden behind a rise in the terrain. So their strength, including that reserve, numbered 10,000 men. That's right, they vastly outnumbered Morcar and Edwin, but they weren't prepared to risk all of their men at once. After all, this was the entire Viking army, and they couldn't exactly nip back to Norway to get some reinforcements. So the battle begins with waiting, basically. The Saxons and the Vikings would have been shouting insults at each other, but unable to advance while Germany Beck was still in full flood. But as the tide receded, the battle became possible. The battle commences. Both sides had to wait for the tide to go out so that the stream was low enough to cross. At that point, Morcar and the Northumbrians charged at Tostig's section, reasoning that they would be the weakest part of the Viking line. They were almost right in this assessment. The Northumbrians pushed forward. Tostig's Vikings began to give ground. The Saxon shield wall pushed forward, but a stalemate developed as Viking reserves began to steady Tostig's line. It is then that Hardrada took his opportunity to strike. Hardrada's elite warriors charged Edward's Mercians, noticing that their flanks were not secure. After a short and one-sided fight, Edwin ordered a retreat back to York to regroup. Morcar, engaged in fierce fighting and hidden from view by the terrain, could not see that the Mercians had left his flank exposed. Part of Hardrada's force pursued the Mercians, and Hardrada charged and went berserk. Berserk is an old Norse term for a man who was high on blood and full of battle fury. Hardrada's men charged the partially surrounded Northumbrians in their flank. Unprotected by their shield wall, they quickly broke. Morcar escaped, but Saxon dead filled the stream such that the pursuing Vikings could go dry foot over them. In other words, they didn't even have to get their feet wet, they could just step from body to body. That's taken from the Norse sagas. And so, here we can see that the Saxon army has been crushed. What are the conclusions? Well, the outcome of the battle is that the Saxons lost about 500 men, but both Earls Edwin and Morcar escaped to fight another day, and they will appear again in our studies. However, they had to fail to defeat the Viking invasion. The Vikings lost around 750 men, but they had been victorious. Hardrada sent about 1/3 of his army, including the wounded, back to his ships at Rickhall. That's about 5 or 6 miles south of Fulford. The rest confidently marched to Stamford Bridge. That's a few miles east of York. They went there ready to receive plunder and tribute from the vanquished English. After all, they were incredibly confident, and Hardrada's start to his campaign had gone virtually flawlessly. So why did the Vikings win at Gate Fulford? Well, what we should have identified is the reasons for the battle are Edwin and Morcar wanted to repel the Viking invasion and protect the north. Both sides had to wait for the tide to go out. Morcar attacked Tostig with some success, and Tostig and the Viking reserve resisted while Hardrada defeated Edwin. Then Hardrada attacked Morcar, who fled. The Vikings won. Earls Morcar and Edwin had escaped. Around 500 Saxons had died, and 750 Vikings had died. What were the consequences then? Well, Edwin and Morcar were forced to wait for Harold Godwinson's army, which now had to march north at full speed in order to confront Hardrada before he could become too secure. Hardrada had also gained confidence. He sent some of his army to guard his boats and the rest to Stamford Bridge to receive tribute from the Saxons. This was likely to prove a very foolish move later on. So we've learnt about King Harold that Harold now had to abandon his southern defences and move north to defeat the Vikings, as unfortunately Edwin and Morcar had failed to do so. But we have learnt that Edwin and Morcar had shown their loyalty to King Harold by standing firm against Hardrada, even if they had lost. And we've learnt from the threat from Norway was very dangerous. Harold Godwinson would now have to defeat an even more confident Viking army to secure his throne. And that is exactly what he intended to do. Pause the video here and make sure that your notes are up to date. In summary, consider the battle. What happened? When did it happen? Where did it take place? Who was involved? Why was it important? Revise it, read it back and try to write it out again from memory. If you're unable to do this, it's worth viewing the video again or perhaps deepening your knowledge by considering using another source. And on that note, this battle map presentation is at an end. I'll say thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed it, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll say thank you and goodbye.